Welcome to Innovators Unscripted, the podcast for innovators by innovators. Today, Tina and I are excited to welcome Dr. Michelle Eckler to the show today. She is not only a member of the VIA 24 Virtual Innovator Academy, but she is also a Google trainer and a leader in the GEG Connecticut group that is on the rise. And if you're from Connecticut, you should absolutely join. But Michelle, before we get into your amazing story of inspiration, can you just take a little minute to introduce yourself to our listeners and where you're coming from?
Sure. So like I said, I'm Michelle Eckler. I'm a 25-year educator. Started as a high school English teacher, moved into secondary English language arts supervisor, and then around 2020, which is when most of us became involved in technology, started getting more heavily involved in technology. And when the district I was in then had a supervisory role for technology, I took that. And then last school year, I actually moved into a new district where I'm the Director of Instructional Technology. So it's been a big change, but I love everything about what I do and getting to help teachers with tech. So.
Wow, that is a big, overwhelming job that I'm sure is very all-encompassing and kind of leads right into our little icebreaker, because I'm sure as a director of technology for a district, you have a lot of tabs in your brain and on your computer open at the same time. So I'm wondering if you can share with us your browser tab confession. How many tabs do you have open, or did you have open right before you popped in? And maybe tell us one that might be unexpected.
So they are all closed right now, so they have my undivided attention. But if I were to open it back up again, there are probably about 8 of them. Right now, it's not too bad. But I have them also in groups, so that helps. What was up there? I am a ISTE certification facilitator, so I do train people to become ISTE certified. And so I had a lot of the scoring that I'm currently doing for their assignments that they've submitted from our recent class. We just had a class last night.
Ooh, I'm an ISTE certified educator, and now that you told me that you might have looked at my stuff, I got all nervous.
No,
No,
I wouldn't have looked at your stuff, just if you're in my
that was way
class.
back in the day, but I was like, oh no.
Unless
I was
unless we use yours as an example. And then in which case
like,
I have seen yours.
I don't think so, but I'm very impressed by the fact that you are juggling all of those different things right now. A district leader and also in charge of ISTE certifications. Sounds like you've done a lot. But let's go back really quick to 2024. And Liz and I were discussing this and how it would be very interesting to talk to you because you were part of the Virtual Innovator Academy. So could you tell us a bit about your challenge in your project, but tell us a little bit more too about the difference between the virtual academy and the one that maybe was in person?
Sure. So my challenge was about digital organization. So at the time, I felt incredibly overwhelmed by my Google Drive. I was, I had started in the district I was working in about 3 months before the pandemic. And at that time, we were still kind of moving between Microsoft and Google. And so when we went into lockdown and had to transition to, distance learning, and we really shifted everything over to Google. And it wasn't long before I couldn't find anything. I mean, even if I searched for it, I was just leaving things named Untitled One. And then I'd have to go in and look for okay, so wait a minute, where did I hide that? What folder was that in? Is that actually what I needed? And so it was getting incredibly overwhelming for me. And when I was applying to be an innovator, one of my colleagues had just started in our district. She came from another district that was also kind of like in between Microsoft and Google. We had really transitioned completely into, aside from email, which I still don't forgive them for to this day, having me have 2 calendars. Um, we had transitioned primarily to Google, and she walked in and she's like, how are we going to keep track of all of this? And that was kind of what sparked the idea for me. There's got to be a way for us to manage it. And then when I finally got to the academy, it was beyond organization. So at first it was just like, how are we going to organize our files? How are we going to keep them in a way that makes sense? And then it became, so it's not really even just about the files. It's like, how do we manage our notes? Like so many of us would be in a meeting taking notes, and then you'd have this untitled 2 somewhere in your drive that had notes from that meeting. And that was before Google had really allowed us to like attach meeting notes to our calendar. So I had seen through my brother who works in corporate America, he was using Microsoft OneNote. I was like, what if there was a way now that Google has tabs to turn that into like a digital notebook for people, and it's something that was similar to OneNote as like an add-on or a Google app. And so that's where the project went. It's failed and stalled a bunch of times, but we're getting there. I'm hoping that it will be finalized at some point. Um, but what I have a few friends who are in Chicago 24, and I kind of talked with them about like the comparison between what I did and what they did. And for them, I think it was like 2 days of in-person training, and they were, together, and they did all of the exact same things that we did in VIA. But for us, it was spread out over weeks. So, we would meet on it was on a Tuesday. I want to say it was 11 a.m. Eastern time. And they really set us up with partners from other countries. So we often were in a meeting with someone from, they might have been 7 or 8 hours ahead, or 7 or 8 hours behind us. We actually had one member of our cohort who was I can't remember if it was Australia or New Zealand. But while it was noon our time, it was midnight his time. So it was like totally, he was in a different day on the same meeting as we were. But they really spread it out well, so that we can kind of work through the different processes, and you had time in between to work on stuff, which was kind of cool. Versus like if you were in that, straight through, you weren't really getting that same amount of time. I had a full week between activities to like really think about it and plan and come up with ideas. So I think for me, that was what made the experience so good, is because I got to stretch it out for a long period of time and really, really work hard on figuring out exactly what I wanted to do with my project.
Tell me a little bit more about how you collaborated. Did they put you in partnerships and groups based on the theme of like what your project was, or was it just sort of organic, or how did that space get created?
Some were random. They just kind of, some were random, some were based upon time zones. They actually did put you with people who were in, the general same time zone as you. I don't actually remember us ever being put in with people who had similar projects, because honestly, I don't think any of us really had similar projects. We were all over the map. Um, I don't remember the name of the first person I was ever in a group with, but I know he was from Rhode Island. And I know that he's also a musician. So I mean, like I remember things. I'm very bad with names. That's like one of my worst traits. I have so much trouble remember. I could meet someone 10 times and still forget their name. But I will remember unique details about that person. So like he worked in Rhode Island, he was a technology coach, and he was a musician also outside of what he was doing. And his project was related to data collection for testing, if I remember. So like I remember all those things, but I can't remember, which is terrible.
No, that's okay. And I mean, but it sounds like there's a great variety of challenges in your cohort. Ours were so Tina and I were both in Chicago, in 24 too. And ours were kind of put into one of four buckets. We had to pick a
Okay.
topic for it to go into. It's always interesting to hear the different nuances of the different academies, but you're the first person we've talked to who was virtual. And a big part of the in-person academy experience that we've kind of talked about, Tina and I together, and then with other members of the in-person cohorts, is that you have this big energy event and it creates all of this buzz and excitement, and you go through all of these highs and lows in a very short amount of time. And then somewhere after that, when you're back in reality, things stall because
Yeah.
you're trying to regain that excitement and then also bring it back to a place where you were kind of a different person before that event. But yours is so unique because it seems like it's much more of a gradual process that's happening in your space, but with support from
Right.
the outside organization. A big part of ours was like those highs and lows and pivoting in the academy and then after. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about maybe some pivots or failing forward that happened during that academy time?
Yeah, so when we were working on the design, I think it was the design sprints, they had us, coming up with ideas and then working through them. Everything was in Google Slides for us. So we had actually groups. We did have like we each had like a coach, and that coach had like 4 or 5 of us in a group. And then we would meet with our coach outside of the regular meetings. So my group, we were all in different places with our projects. We all were in situations where like we would go through the activity that we had to do during that particular session and be like, this makes no sense. You have to turn it around and figure out, okay, so maybe my problem isn't actually a problem for more than just me. Like I got to that when I was the digital organization piece was a conversation I had with a lot of people throughout the entire process. Even as I had pivoted to a different idea for what I wanted to do for the project. And I found that as I talked to people, I learned that everybody's organization style is so different. There wasn't really a way for me to solve that problem for them, but I could try to find a way to help them with other pieces of that puzzle. But we were constantly being pushed to look at each of the different activities they put us in a way that said, don't just assume your answers are right. And so I felt like I was constantly having to shift gears, change what I was doing. Like, nope, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe this is going to work. And then like ultimately ended up in a place that I felt made sense. But there were the highs and lows as well. I think for us, what happened was those highs and lows might have lasted all week. Because we were constantly having to go back to what we were doing and prepare things, and we didn't have the opportunity to actually present our projects the same way as you would in person. Like we all had to create a video, and then they played the videos in our last meeting so we could all see each other's kind of like almost like a pitch for what we were going to be doing, versus actually being able to present in front of a group of people. And it was kind of cool though, because that was right around the times that Google Vids came out. So we all got free access for that little bit of time to like the premium version that they had at that time. So we could really develop our videos well.
That is fascinating. I guess that is very much a very unique perspective, that the successes of the week can also be the frustrations of the week, right? For what you were talking about. And then I like how you were mentioning that everybody's organizational style is so unique. It's amazing to think about. That was some idea that you really wanted to tackle because it seems really, really big. And now as a director of instructional technology for your whole district, like where do you see that teachers are probably the most overwhelmed when it comes to managing different tools, or especially digital tools? Do you notice maybe it may not be the organizational piece, but like what do you see an overwhelm or frustration for teachers right now?
I see the hardest part for everyone is shifting from what we were thrust into when it comes to technology, where we had to use educational technology tools to reach our students, to now when we're back in person, we're teaching back similarly to the way we did pre-2020. But now the struggle comes, how am I going to meaningfully implement these pieces of technology in my classroom? I'm very lucky that I work in a district where we have really streamlined the tech tools that we provide to our teachers. We have, the whatever the highest level of the Google Suite is for our staff. We do purchase that, and I love that they're starting to integrate Gemini more into all of those apps for our teachers. But we've limited the tools that we purchase because people were getting app fatigue. They were getting tech fatigue. It was getting hard to pick out what tool to use, why I'm going to use it. Does it actually help meet the needs of my lesson? So we've really tried to streamline that and work towards helping them have that understanding. But I see that as a major problem in general right now in education, because we're kind of fighting that battle of there's this group of people who want us to go back to basics, and then there's this group of us who recognize that, yeah, for some things that's great, but for others, we're going to put our students at a disadvantage because they're not going to be writing in pencil and paper and jobs in 10 years. So we have to teach them the tech side of things too. And you have the whole concept of AI coming in, and then looking at academic integrity and what is acceptable use of these tools, and shifting the mindset from acceptable really to responsible use of tools. And so I think right now there's a lot of overwhelm because there's just so much so fast. And it started in 2020, and I really can't feel like has slowed. I feel like it's gotten faster. There's more.
No, absolutely. I mean, you bring up so many really timely points of conversations that are happening globally and then locally in classrooms and in school committee meetings. And even I mean, there are screen time ban bills
Yep.
in states right now. So I think really what it comes down to is something that you mentioned about intentionality, and that we're using it
Mhm.
intentionally and meaningfully, and that what we're accomplishing with these tools is something that, first of all, like we can't accomplish without them. But then it's also that double that dual meaning of it, that they're using it to access curriculum, but they're also learning to use these tools that they're going to need to use in their
Right.
careers and in their own education. And then enter AI, and you can, like, not only for your own work, but for your own education, for you to be able to advance your own interest and really take autonomy when you talk about academic integrity, and for teachers in their professional learning as well as students in their learning. So if you could kind of sum things up, what do you believe that teachers most need to understand right now about navigating technology in general in 2026?
I would say the biggest thing right now is to focus on one tool. You have most teachers have many tools at their disposal. Focus on one that you want to learn and get really good at as an educator, and integrating that into your instruction. And I challenge people to go beyond simple slides or docs, but if you are going to use slides and docs, how could you make them interactive? How could you get your students involved? Like, really immerse themselves in one. And that way it becomes less about the tool and more about how to use the tool to support instruction. And I think if we went that route, and then the next year you pick a new one, and then you pick a new one until your toolbox is full of all of these tech tools that you can very easily integrate into what you do.
Yes, building that toolbox out of your favorite tools, right? The ones you feel comfortable with.
Yep.
That is a great perspective of leadership, and understanding that it's not about having a bunch that you're not using well, but having a few that you use really well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of tech fatigue and going back to less tech, when you're designing PD or professional learning situations for educators, how do you get to that point, helping the teachers build confidence with technology, or even wanting to use technology? Because I'm sure you're in a space of both spectrums, right? You're on that end of the teacher who's like, I love technology. I have 29 different tools I really want to use. And then you have the one that's like, I really need to get back to pen and paper, and I don't want a tech tool in my classroom. And so now I'm wondering, how, as a director of instructional technology, are you managing that space now?
So one of the things that we're working on, it was supposed to happen March 11th, but I live in the Northeast, and snow. So our school year has shifted, and it's now going to happen on June 24th. That was supposed to be our professional learning day. Um, and so we've actually provided time within that day for what we've called sandbox time, playground time, where the teachers can come in for a 2-hour block during that day with a few experts on a particular topic. So, like, I'm hosting the AI one with my colleague, and there's no agenda. They have 2 hours to sit in that room with their computers and work on a project that utilizes AI with two AI. I mean, maybe not experts, but for that particular situation, we'll call ourselves AI experts, um, to help them figure out different ways to do that. And so they get to bring their own project to the table. what they want to use the AI to help them with. When we put that out there, we're like, we don't care if all you want to do is create a bank of parent emails. Like you want to create a bank for yourself to keep in a folder. So if you have to send something off quickly, you want to use AI to figure out how to make your feedback sound better when you're providing it to your students. Great. We'll help you figure out how to do that. But we're going to put a large group of teachers in the room and give them that. And I think when I looked at the list of people who signed up for it, there were some people I was very surprised because they just seemed to be, some of the people who were kind of not anti-technology, but not the kind of people who I think of like, yes, I want to do this for 2 hours. So I think just offering that time was huge because we don't get that time as educators. So to give them that with that person there is going to be hopefully really helpful in getting them to kind of get on board.
What a unique design for a professional learning experience. I want to sign up. Can I come? I'm not that far away.
Absolutely. You're not that far away. Come on down.
I'll drive down and we're done on the 23rd. So
Oh, see, look at that.
So
Perfect. You can come the
on
next
my way
day.
to ISTE, I'll stop in Connecticut.
Yep.
But it's so interesting because I was going to ask you a little bit about how your innovator experience is like influenced you now, like if there's things that have taken you away. But now that I'm listening to you, I can hear little bits of the Innovator Academy in that experience that you just described. So I'm wondering, even though your project itself is still evolving, and we find that a lot with innovators, that like the project, especially as tech is evolving, the project kind of goes, the people stay, the experience stays, and the strategies stay. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the experiences or strategies that you had in the academy and how they're kind of transferring themselves to this new role that you have.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was that I loved that the Innovator Academy really aligned with all of the work with ISTE as well. So I had recently, when I did the academy, I had recently become an ISTE certified educator at that time. And one of the things that you do in ISTE certification is the design thinking process. And that's basically what the virtual academy or the Innovator Academy was. And I have found that between that and my work with the design thinking process and trying to help teachers understand that, I didn't kind of infused it into my world accidentally, and now I can't live without it. Like if I'm looking for a new project or a new idea in the district or something that I want to implement, the first thing I'm doing is asking people like, would people actually like this? Do you think people would use this? How many people would? And then it's like, okay, here's my idea of what I want it to look like. Like one of the things that we're doing right now, I have a group of technology integration specialists that right now I have 4 elementary ones. And I'm working to grow my department, and our goal is to, fill our district so every school has at least one. But one of the things that's happening is they're all going through ISTE certification and Google Coach certification training at the same time, which is kind of crazy while they're also working. And I give them time though. It's not go home and do it yourself. I give them time during the day. But they've been developing all of these resources and tools. So today I just kind of threw into our Google chat and like, what do you guys think about putting together a central hub so everybody can access all of this stuff? I'm like, I've been playing with this tool called Notion, and I'm learning more and more about it. And I think we could probably create it where we can put like these little blue check marks on it that says it's up to date, and like, you guys can be responsible for the ones that you create to make sure that if Google changes something, we know what they changed. And they were like, I think people would use that. I'm like, great, let's put together a survey and find out how many people would and would they go there. And so like my brain lately is just like everything is in that design thinking process. And like now I'm like, okay, I need to prototype what this is going to look like. Let's go look at how these people I follow on YouTube set it up and what can I do. And like that's just how my brain is operating, and I don't feel like I did that before the Innovator Academy. Like I was just kind of the triage as I go person, not the think the rollout through and how we're going to make it happen person. And now everything that I do involves all of those steps because I am district wide. I am rolling out things to large groups of people on a regular basis, brand new things, new ideas. I have to stop and think about how it's going to affect them before I even implement it. And I have the academy to thank for making me think that way.
That is amazing. It feels very intentional, and I'm very impressed by the idea of having your team be forward thinking. Like you said, that as opposed to triaging something when things aren't going well, which I think is somewhat a perspective that a lot of districts, I won't call it my own, but a lot of districts do. And so just having them go through that ISTE certification and doing did you say Google Coach or Trainer?
Yeah, coach. They're going to do coach first, then trainer. I know it's a little backwards, but they're serving in coach roles. So we went coach first.
Either way, that's great because they do have so many different pieces that are like similar and parallel to each other, right? So it sounds like you're being very proactive in that, and that now the design thinking process really shapes like every day and how you're thinking. I want to get into more of a personal aspect of what shapes your everyday and in your background and every part of element of everybody makes you a unique person, right? So you shared openly about being an autism mom and being present in that space. And so how has that perspective influenced the way you think about accessibility in technology and education? And how has that sort of blended in with this whole situation you have?
Yeah, I mean, technology changed my boys' lives. I have two children. He's my oldest is almost 12 and taller than me, so I don't want to talk about that part. But he'll be 12 in May. My youngest is 7, he'll be 8 in September. They were both diagnosed as autistic when they were younger. My oldest was 3 when he was diagnosed. My little one wasn't until he was closer to 5, just because he had a very strange. He was 18 months when we went into lockdown, so all of the normal evaluations that they would do for a child couldn't really be done because they weren't being done in person. And so we tried doing them virtually, didn't really work out that well. Like there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened. But they're both nonverbal, so they use augmentative communication devices, augmentative communication, AAC devices. So they both have an iPad that has a program called Proloquo Go on it. And Proloquo allows them to communicate with us. Mostly at this point in their lives, they're both communicating needs more than anything else. But my older son is working on being able to communicate beyond just needs, actually like introducing himself, telling people who he is, all of those pieces. And so that really opened my eyes up to why are there so many places where we could provide alternate means of gaining the same content for our students, and yet we're not always using it. I mean, I think of the universal design for learning principles and how the whole idea behind it is really to just say, here is, I don't know, like we're learning about the War of 1812 in social studies. Instead of just having to read out of the textbook, here's a video you can watch that accesses the exact same content. Here's a podcast you can listen to about the same content. Here's a narrated presentation with images. I mean, there's just so many different ways. And as a former English teacher, I know that understanding how to read is important, but I also recognize that even in the real world, you don't always have to read to get the information you want. So while we want to make sure we're producing literate young adults, for some of our children, reading might be out of the picture. And so we don't want to leave them behind by not giving them access. So let's use that technology to support it. I listen to audiobooks sometimes, like I try to read. I read as much as I can, but occasionally I'll throw an audiobook on in my car because I want to read something and I can't read and drive. So, we as adults do that all the time. So to be able to provide that opportunity to our children who may have learning disabilities, to me is an important piece of what we do and an important piece of what our district is working towards. I'm also working in a district where our superintendent was a special education teacher, was the director of pupil personnel. So she is always behind us when we talk about whatever we need related to making sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students. And it's not just our students with disabilities, it's our multilingual learners as well. I mean, we have a very large population of students in our district where English is not their first language. And so we need to use this technology to help support them. You can't determine if a child whose first language is Spanish, if they can read by testing them in English. You just can't, right, when they're young, because they might actually be able to read just fine in their first language. they're still learning their second language, which makes it harder for them to read. So, using that technology to support us and making sure we're providing the right interventions for our students and the right supports for our students is so necessary. And now we have it. So we need to use it because we didn't have
Yes.
it for a long time.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So you have this amazing, you have this perspective and this foundation and this human first, human centered, student centered practice. And you've also seemed to have unlocked your brain into this design thinking that has just permeated everything from your interactions with your kiddos at home to the students that you serve in your district and to your colleagues, the way that you're working with your technology staff. It sounds like you've like really unlocked this treasure that you're now kind of like spreading around your district and in your family and in your work. And so I'm wondering if before we wrap things up, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who kind of still is feeling stuck and overwhelmed by all of these tools on this side and all of these problems on this side. You've made this like magic connection between them. And I can just see, like, I can see the pistons firing as you're like, idea, idea, idea. What is like one piece of advice you could give to someone who's feeling like the weight of it that might help them kind of start to connect those sides?
I would say listen to the people around you, whether it's your students, your colleagues, if you're an administrator, your staff, because even if they're not saying it, how they're feeling, they're saying it in how they act or what they do, or just whether or not they're able to actually complete the things you're asking of them. And that's kind of like, that's where you get that empathy part, where you're starting to put yourself in someone else's mindset, and see kind of where they're coming from, and then make those decisions based upon that collective knowledge of where they are. And when I think of like a classroom teacher and what they're, sometimes it's like, oh, I want to do something flashy for my students. Well, but maybe that group of students isn't the group of students that want something flashy. They just need that simple drag and drop activity in a set of Google Slides that is kind of interactive for them so that they get it more. It's not always about the fancy video game style tools that are out there right now. Sometimes it's just a simple tool. But you have to listen to those people and then make those decisions based upon it. And I think I mean, I've been a school leader since 2009, in various capacities. And I think that's just something that you have to develop over time. When you're working with adults, but I think it's something that, like, if you're working with kids, you can implement almost immediately. Just take a minute and sit back and listen to them and say, what do you want to do with this technology wise? Like, do you even want to be doing it this way? Is there another way that would make more sense to you? Because I mean, especially if you're working with middle schoolers and or high schoolers, they're not going to, actually elementary schoolers too, they're not going to sugarcoat it. They're going to tell you exactly what they think. And some of it you have to take with a grain of salt, and some of it is legitimate, like, kind of advice for you as an educator to figure out what to do. But yeah, definitely it all comes down to listening. And if you're not willing to listen, then you're going to continue to falter.
Absolutely. And you have to do it intentionally, which is hard, especially I would think when you start moving up into leadership roles and administrative roles where the weight of all of the people and all of the jobs and all of the tasks make
Mhm.
the time to listen so hard that you really have to make a choice to do it. And it seems like you have just done that and thrived
Hope I
and
can keep doing
you're
it.
crushing it. So awesome job. Before we finally wrap things up, is there anything while we have you that you want to talk about or promote, things you have coming up, or a way that people can get in touch with you? Because I know you're inspiring all of our listeners.
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's, if you just search my name, you'll find me. I'm also on Instagram. That's at Dr. M. Eckler, EDU. I would love to promote another podcast. If you're interested in learning about what happens in the Stratford Public Schools in Stratford, Connecticut, we do have our podcast, which is called From Forest to Shore. And it's an inside look at everything that happens. From Forest to Shore is actually the city motto. And so that's what we named our podcast. It's a look at everything that happens within our district. We actually, our most recent episode last week that aired was with a group of CTE students, and all the different pathways that they're in. So we talked to a student in culinary, a student in video production, a student in our nursing program, and then a student in our video gaming pathway, which was really cool to talk about. And this Thursday, we have our Read Across America podcast. So at the very end, there's a special little treat for everyone where we have some of our littlest learners in the district telling us all about their favorite books. So
I love that.
yeah, I
We will
co-host
link
that
it.
with
We'll link your podcast in the
yeah.
description for this episode.
Awesome. I'd love that because we don't want it to just be a Stratford thing. We really want people to see what's going on in our district and hopefully inspire them, or even inspire them to have their own podcast. Why not put out a podcast about what's going on in your school district and all the good things that are happening there?
Look at that. Even more further evidence that you are constantly design thinking. So even though I think we started out this conversation saying you felt like your original project stalled, we went down this amazing path of discussing intentionally listening. I love the idea, like even just wrapping it up just now with podcast and involving students with it. The idea of making sure that you put teachers in a room and allow them to have a discussion with you to intentionally design digital spaces. So thank you so much for coming on our show today, Dr. Eckler. If you are a Google and if you're a Google Innovator, we want to hear your story, how your own work has possibly evolved. So come on our show. If you are an aspiring innovator and wondering, whether a design thinking process is going to help you in for tackling a problem at your school, well, it probably is. So hop on here too. Keep coming on here to come up with ways to see how teaching can maybe be a little bit easier, because all these innovators have these amazing ideas. So come on and listen to our podcast next time. Stay connected, stay inspired, and remember to keep it unscripted.